Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. We're your wellness check-in team. Join us each week or when you can. We enjoy exploring wellness concepts and reminding you to make time for wellness. This is episode 56. We hope our territorial acknowledgement improves allyship with Indigenous people within a reconciliation process. We're on the Haldeman Tract, located on the traditional territories of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We acknowledge the presence and traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land.
We're back again for another episode of Let's Be Well Together. I'm Julie Wilson, and I'm here with John, and I want to talk today about environmental wellness. It's forefront in my mind because we just had a Green Team committee meeting, and John and I, we sit on that together, and we were talking about different ways our workplace can help environment and the little things that individuals can do to help the environment. And I know that that is one of the facets, environmental wellness. And I wanted to know a little bit about where you're coming from on environmental wellness and how that fits in with everything that you wrote about in your book.
How do you get past the chicken and egg thing with all this stuff? So by way of example, some things, I don't know what came first, my ideas for the book or experiences that led to me writing it. And so this is a perfect example. So I joined the Green Team before COVID, and I'm not sure until I did that how much I was focusing on environmental wellness as an important contributing factor to my overall wellness. I think probably because I joined the Green Team and we had a couple presentations by Sustainable Waterloo Region. That is probably why I gravitated towards it and put it as one of my areas of wellness that are important to me. So it's funny. So and then once I started reading more and more about it and got more and more educated about it, I've become pretty passionate about it. And like I said in our meeting, over the top. Like I actually think that, and we're going to keep coming back to it. We are, if not past the point of return, we're right on the edge, and we've got to do something to protect the world we're living on.
There are a lot of things that we need to do to help the environment for sure. And one of those ways, which you touch upon in your book, is about water consumption and containing water. And there was a storm that went through southern Ontario.
Right. We had that crazy storm in May. Exactly.
I learned a term that I'd never learned before, and that was derecho, which apparently it's a scientific environmental term for the type of storm that went through, which is straight line heavy winds. The storm went through, and there were thousands of individuals without power. And that weekend, when that happened, I went home to my parents, and they were without power for a few days. My dad went out, took his bucket that he has to get some water, and we filled it up, and we were at home. And I don't know for what reason, but my mother was washing her hands. And this really struck me because she looked at me and she said, "Do you realize how much water we use?" It seemed funny, but on the other hand, it was like, my gosh, she had used such a little tiny bit of water to wash her hands and rinse her hands. And we were there for 3-4 days, and we used that one small bucket of water, and we were able to survive for 3 or 4 days on that one, for washing our hands. We had drinking water in a separate container, but just for the daily hygiene, washing teeth, and that really got me thinking about the steps we could take to improve our environment, and the point you made in your book about the water consumption and containing water.
Yeah, ever since I started thinking about it, and it's not dramatic what I do, but little things. You shut the tap off when you're not using it instead of letting it run sometimes. Use less water when you're brushing your teeth.
Right. Exactly.
Less water when you're washing your hands. There's a whole bunch of scenarios where you can contain it to a small degree, and it's important. And yeah, I take your point. So I guess, the well wasn't working because no electricity, so they could only use a small amount of water, or they'd have to get some more. Yeah, and we had our power out. Luckily, we didn't lose water. But, if you go camping or do stuff outside, you realize how little water you actually need to get by. And so we don't have to have some living where we're using almost no water and it's really inconvenient, but it sure is easy for all of us to do a little bit less.
That got me to thinking, during COVID, when we went camping, I was so stressed about the fact that, oh my goodness, there's no showers. So that all the showers were shut down, of course. And I had friends saying, how are you going to survive for 4 or 5 days? My family wanted to go camping for 4 or 5 days. And how are you going to survive without a shower? It was fine. There was a lake. I jumped in the lake, right? You had to swim before bed. There's nothing better than, having a really refreshing swim right before bed. You crawl into your sleeping bag. It feels great. And you haven't used any of the water that's, from the showers, and survived. There are little things like that you can do.
Yeah, and there's still things we need to do. There's 2 ways to go about it, but you have to do both. You have to take care of your own little space, but you also have to think about, are there opportunities to join in larger groups, whether it's with fundraising or whatnot, that are doing these huge exercises to try and help larger problems that people can't fix on an individual level. But one thing you just made me think of is, we're talking about when the power goes out or you go camping, how little water you need. It is getting desperate in places in the world. It's unbelievable. And, the United States has a lot of news, and so we're seeing a lot of stories right now about what's happening in the Southwest with Lake Powell and Lake Mead, and probably water rationing being needed. A couple of years ago, it was South Africa who hit unbelievably low levels in their lake. I may have mentioned to you, I've really gotten into the show How the Universe Works. And
okay.
So I've been watching all these shows, and a huge part of what they talk about is about how planets form and how atmospheres form and what affects them. And when you start seeing that, you realize how small we really are, humans, in the grand scheme of things. The rules of physics, the laws of physics that have to do with radiation coming from the sun and solar winds and magnetism, and those things are going to have impacts.
Yes.
And if we make the world overheat through carbon emissions and the rest of it, it's just going to happen. It's these natural forces are just going to come into play, and physics is going to operate, and parts of the planet are going to become unlivable until possibly the whole planet becomes unlivable. And that has nothing to do with being a tree hugger or, being overly dramatic.
No.
That's just the way physics works. And the more I realize how the universe works, the more I realize that we have to take care of our planet. Now, one other thing about that too is when you watch that show, and it's season after season, you realize how unbelievably unique the Earth is. So I think a lot of people would think, well, there's trillions of planets, there's trillions of stars, so there's more than trillions of planets, and so there's a whole bunch of Earths everywhere. It is unbelievable what combination of factors makes our planet livable, with liquid water on the surface, with magnetism that prevents the solar winds from scraping off our atmosphere. So it's not just a matter of physics at work, but it's also a matter of appreciating how lucky we are. We are so lucky.
Exactly.
Let's not blow it.
I think I'm going to start watching that show.
Well, you should. It's fascinating. So, and you learn a lot about a whole bunch of things, but it makes you really appreciate the environment and how special and lucky we are to be on this planet.
Exactly.
Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds. We are interviewing in the area of spiritual wellness today. It's part of our effort to speak with people from different religions, outlooks, and beliefs, and open eyes to the things that we share in common. And we're back with Reverend Ann Anderson, a community pastor at Martin Luther University College in Waterloo. You'll recall that she pastors a community called Third Space. She's a mom to 2 fantastic kids, a partner to a great husband, and a student. She's a PhD candidate in human relationships. She calls Waterloo home after traveling and working in the US, the UK, and Africa over the years. She loves to read and play music and do boot camp with great friends. Welcome back, Reverend Ann.
Thank you.
I should ask you about that boot camp. Is that like the fire it up, get physical?
Yeah, definitely. I have a good friend who's a trainer. She's been training me for over 6 years. And so mid-COVID, she's like, we're going outside. And now she does it online. She, in the meantime, she also does, and I'm skipping tonight so I can chat with you.
Uh-oh. Well, maybe I'll just steal a minute on that, because a huge part of our show is we try and just remind people to be physical, that being physical, aerobic exercise, other exercise, it helps us get in touch with ourselves. How do you find, I'm not going to take the whole session for this, but do you find energizing, and how does it impact your everyday life?
Hugely. It has helped me in so many ways. And I always chat about it with other folks. Like, moving my body helps with my stress. It helps with my thinking. I just feel better energy wise. Like, if you had to take one thing away, I wouldn't let you take exercise away.
That's my experience as well. And I'm glad you said that. But in any event, we were going to talk about Lent. So when we first were introduced, I mentioned Lent in the context of fasting, and you said, well, that's true, John, but there's a lot more to it than that. And that intrigued me. So I'm wondering, what are some of the other things, when you think about Lent, what are some of the other things that you think about?
Yeah. I just read a cool article this week, actually getting ready for our Lent at our community in Third Space. Lent means lengthening in Old English. And so it recalls the lengthening of days. We're getting into spring and our days are getting longer. It was also the preparation time traditionally for Easter. So people would prepare for baptism. On the eve of Easter, there was traditionally a new fire and a great big celebration, often lots of baptisms.
Was that a tradition at one point, that there were a lot of baptisms around Easter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in the Christian, older Christian traditions, this is something that was lived out in many churches.
Okay.
Doesn't necessarily happen all the time these days, but
it's interesting to hear the history.
Yeah, and I think it's something we can tap into. People can use this time for preparation. Sometimes people give up something. You hear about, I'm giving up chocolate for Lent, or my friend always likes to say, I'm giving up watermelon. But
I'm assuming that they don't like watermelon.
They don't like watermelon, and where are you going to get watermelon in the north?
Good point.
And some people take something on. So they maybe take a new practice on, or they decide to do something for the 40 days. I've heard lately of communities, they put a box in their house and they declutter 40 things, like one every day, or they give 40 things to a food bank, one every day, the 40 days of Lent. So there's lots of it, but often it's rooted in practice. So either reading a devotion, spending more intentional time in prayer, or silence or meditation. There's so much. It's almost like, okay, what am I going to choose this year? What do I want to spend time doing and being? So for me, I'm choosing this year to do a devotional, and I've found a great one. It's called Good Enough by Kate Bowler. And it's about being, she says it's 40-ish devotions for a life of imperfection.
Well, let me just ask you that. So you mentioned read a devotion. What exactly is a devotion?
That's a good question. So from my understanding, it's a short reading that might be focused on a text or a series of texts, and might ask a question or a practice journal about this idea after you've read this, or here's a prayer that's centered on this reading. So I try and spend some time every day, whether it's the start of my day, when I land in my office, spend 10, 15 minutes doing it, or before bed, depending on how the day unfolds. So yeah, that's how I would spend a devotional time, but there's so many ways to do it.
The way you're describing is for 40 days. Each day you read something and maybe do an act to accompany that reading.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had one young woman that I loved her practice. And I want to do it some year. I haven't decided to do it yet, but because it's quite intense. She decided to take the texts for the year, for the days that were appointed, the scripture texts, and continue the story. So she would write almost like a fan fiction,
right,
of the text, like what would have happened to that person after they encountered Jesus, or how would this story played out. So it was her way of really getting into the story and the narrative.
Oh, that's interesting. And I think the other thing you mentioned is people might do meditation, or they might do prayers, or
and there's lots of different forms of prayer. So some people might take a particular way of praying. Like an example would be Lectio Divina, and it's reading the text and then reading the text again and reading the text again. And you ask yourself questions after each time you read it, and look at different perspectives as you read the text. So, and some people it's silence, or they might say a phrase, be still and know that I am God, a phrase from scripture, or they might pick a different phrase, something that they're focusing on, and just continually say that phrase in the quiet again and again.
It's almost a combination. We sometimes hear about Eastern philosophies and Eastern outlooks where they have a mantra, they're meditating, or they use a mantra, and it sounds like maybe that's the concept that's being used here.
Yeah, definitely similar. Yeah, I love how all of our communities kind of intertwine. There's just different ways that we come at similar things.
Yeah, and so for Lent, is there a theme? So for example, let's say you're going to do different devotions or different readings. Is there a theme that's associated with Lent, or is it anything to do with spirituality that you're thinking about during Lent?
So many people talk about repentance, so turning. So Lent is that time to repent and turn from the ways that aren't healthy and the ways that aren't loving and good. So a chosen turning from that. To repent is to turn. So that's definitely an overarching theme for many folks. Reflection. And actually now, lately, I've been hearing a lot of folks focusing on new growth. Really exciting to hear people connect Lent with new growth. For me, it echoes spring.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
For sure. And it echoes this hope. I think that's what Easter brings, is this wide open hope, but it's almost like tiny shoots of hope. So those are the big themes that I think about.
They do seem tied together, and just looking at it from my perspective, from what you're talking about, I can imagine if you're trying to turn away from things that you shouldn't be doing. For me, I'd also then want to start thinking about things I should be doing, and that does give me a feeling of growth and something new. But definitely in spring, there is something magical. One of the great things about living in Canada and having 4 seasons is that's an amazing time of year. I don't like the mud or the wind. It's really windy, but I love that feeling of new growth in spring. And I can see that being we're a little early, but I can see Lent heading into it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's like those little glimmers. And that was the thing that I read in that one article about lengthening days for Lent. The author, Erin Lane, she talked about living into the lengthening. So how do we live into the grief maybe we're experiencing, or live into the grace or the lengthening of light in our lives and in our communities?
What were some of the thoughts on how to do that?
Well, this is the thing that I love. She didn't give us prescriptions.
Right.
And actually, I had a good conversation with somebody about this. One of our third space communities said, "Why didn't she prescribe it? Why didn't she tell us what to do?" and I thought, well, that's the freedom, right? For each of us, it looks a little different. So for me, living into grace or grief might look different than even my partner or my kids. living into grace for them might mean a dance party at nighttime after dishes are done. For me, it might mean going for a walk as the light turns outside, or having a deep, heartfelt conversation with a neighbor. So I think it's unique, and then that's the freedom. I think that blows it wide open for us, and it's hard and good all at the same time.
I love it. I can tell you that is a theme from our show too. So I came up with categories that are important to me, but we're really trying hard in our show not to tell people what to do, except to say, why don't you think about what categories of wellness are really important to you? Why don't you think about the activities that work for you to fill those categories, and try and practice self-awareness, try and learn about yourself and find the path that works for you, because I guarantee it won't be the one that works for me.
Yeah.
But, having said that, there's always the theme that we say to everybody that still, though, we here believe that physicality is critical to all that stuff.
Definitely.
And so is spirituality, and different people do all those things in different ways. So I really like that thought. So what have you, so I think you started to say what you were doing. You're doing the devotion. And so how's it working out?
So far, so good. I mean, they're hit and miss days, right? And I think that's the joy of picking a devotion called Good Enough, right? So giving myself a little grace to know that the world will get hairy, and some days I won't read, and some days I won't pause. But that doesn't mean failing. It just means that it played out different than what I thought it might. But it's been life-giving to hear somebody else's words, to think about ideas that aren't my own, to just twist the day a little bit is always really helpful.
Yeah, I love that too. I think a lot of people have a tendency, if they say, okay, I am going to do this for 40 days, and then they miss a day and they think, oh, I blew it. It's over. It's like, no, it's not over. You missed a day. So do 39.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, so if someone had told me 6 years ago that I would love exercise and not want it taken away from me, I would have laughed at them. But for me, it's about creating the patterns and finding the joy and the life in them, so that it becomes something you don't want to ever give up, even when you miss a day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay, so we're toward the end again, and the question I ask everybody, and I guess obviously you're not going to say that your area is physical, so but let me ask the question. So we talk about wellness in different categories, and how we all trying to struggle to try and be balanced in all the areas that are important to us. Mm-hmm. And so the question we ask each guest is, are you currently neglecting an area of wellness? And if so, can you think of one thing you can do to turn things around in that area?
I think another one that I think is quieter in my world is environmental. And I have a goal. Actually, Third Space folks are heading out to camp in yurts in April. Okay. And so hopefully we will spend some time at the Pinery in our yurts, enjoying outside and breathing and being outside and walking. So that's my hope, is to explore outside more.
It's amazing. I don't know. I've never really been able to figure out all the chemistry and whatnot. All I know is spending time in nature makes me feel wonderful. So I hope you guys have a fantastic time in the yurts.
Us too.
For people who are listening, a yurt is kind of like a temporary, it's better than a tent, but it's not a house, but it's pretty cool. So thanks again very much, Reverend Ann, for your time and for helping us understand a little bit more about Lent. And that's it from my side.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm Cameron, and welcome to another installment of The Adventures of the Starving Artist. I've had a pretty routine week this week. Lots of lessons, a little bit of writing, both for myself and for others, and practice, of course. Practice makes habit. One of the things I've been trying to practice is my writing. Of course, I have to keep on top of my instruments as well, and there are many. Between acoustic guitars, electric guitars with varying amounts of strings, a bass, drums, and the piano, and of course singing. It's a pretty stacked schedule of practice. So adding writing into the mix, I had to make some space. It's been pretty good, though. The thing I'm practicing is trying to get over the hurdle that has plagued me for as long as I can remember, which is every time I write something, I immediately begin to second guess it, pull it apart, and in the end, hate it. More often than not, this leads to a graveyard, a file folder graveyard on my Mac, full of nuggets of songs, half-finished projects, tons of, there's little bits in there that are, I think, decent, like that have potential. But then, like I said, I'm plagued by this self-doubt, I guess. So I've been actively practicing trying to just get over that and get past it. And I'm making some progress, I think. But what I want to tell you about today is one of the things I'm most proud of writing lately. And that's for another artist. It's not for me yet. Yet being the operative word. But for this particular song, the draft that was sent to me had a piano part that was just super simple. It was 2 chords. They bounced back and forth between each other, and there was no other motion. Now, the chords themselves are beautiful. They're very lush. There were some tensions in there. I won't go too far into the details of it. I won't bore you. But basically, they weren't just standard-sounding chords. They had some nice color to them. But the problem that I thought needed solving with it was that there was no motion. There was no movement. And so, even though the chords themselves had this beautiful color to them, I needed something more to happen. And so I finally wrote this piano part that just sort of went, aha, and took the lushness, the close harmonies, and the complexities of the chords and added some subtle motion that moved through. One of the lyrics in the song, I don't want to give it all away here, but it's the lyric is, blew down my house of cards. And in the initial piano part that was sent to me, it was just the 2 chords bouncing, like I said. But one of my favorite things to do when writing music is to employ prosody, which is actually a poetry term, but it's similar to onomatopoeia, where the lyric and the music work together. I think we've talked about this before, so if this is old news, well, there you go. But for the uninitiated, an example would be, for instance, if the lyric was, never gonna stop, I'm never gonna stop, and the music stops, that's prosody. So this one, blew down my house of cards, I have the piano descending in this tinkly melody. Sounds like this. So, like I said, I was trying to capture the lyric, the essence of the lyric, in the music. Blew down my house of cards. The notes are descending. They cascade in a pattern. It sounds to me like they're carried on the wind, blown down. A little glimpse into the process, and some honesty about how I'm working through some stuff. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
We love our listeners and thanks for joining us. Please help spread the word about Let's Be Well Together podcast. Follow us and rate us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Instagram at lets.be.well.together and let your friends know about us.
Move that body like we're meant to do. So from time to time, John and I are going to talk about the gym. And today when we went to the gym, usually it's not so busy, but today it was incredibly busy.
Crazy.
And when we walk in, the equipment, all the cardio equipment is right there in front of us. And our favorite machines were not available, both John and I. And John, none of the treadmills were available. So what do you do? And it was just kind of a drag. And we decided we want to talk about our favorite equipment at the gym.
In our gym, there's 8 treadmills in the main room and 3 in a side room. But the 3 in the side room are completely different. I've never used them. So I just need to get my butt over there and figure out how to use it because I don't do anything complicated. I'm not going to get into it, but the reason I use the treadmill at the gym is pretty specific.
Right.
And so I don't need to worry about hills and stuff like that.
Right.
it's the stupidest thing, right? So one of them, where the screen is, and it kind of rattles a bit when my feet hit. So I kind of don't like that.
Yeah. So to me, all the treadmills look the same. They seem to work the same. But for John, he's got...
So one of them rattles. Another one, I don't think it's calibrated right. So when I'm running at the speed that should feel comfortable, it's uncomfortable.
Oh,
now,
okay.
It's probably not. I probably had a bad day. But for whatever reason, that machine scares me.
Okay.
Another one, you can't actually push the pause button. For whatever reason, it doesn't work. So there's an emergency stop button. So you have to use it as the pause button.
But if you use the emergency stop button, it completely stops it, doesn't it?
Well, the pause does too. It's okay. Like it can work like a pause button, but whatever. Like I'm just fussy. and then for whatever reason, there's two of them in particular where I had to go in and do a 10K run. And I sometimes struggle on the 10K run on the treadmill. And both of these machines, I went in, it felt amazing, right? So now probably I just had a good day. But for whatever reason, I now associate those two machines with
as good
performance. So those are my two favorites.
Okay. The other problem for you is that, like, for me, I can be like, oh, well, I'll go do this and I'll do that. Like, you can alternate your machines and just change your workout. But for you can't, because you're literally on that treadmill the whole time.
I'm only there to run 10K. Now, the good news is today that happened. And I got stuck using the rattly one.
Yes.
And it really wasn't that bad. And I had a great run.
I didn't notice it at all.
So it's now on my favorite again. So,
it is.
So I guess maybe what it shows is you shouldn't be an idiot and just only have favorites. But yours is different, okay?
Mine
so
is
why don't you
different.
explain why yours is different?
For me, I like the elliptical. And it's awesome because it doesn't have any impact at all. So it's really gets my heart rate up and I love it. But there's only 2 machines out of 10 that I like. And the reason why is because their stride is much longer. So I can make longer strides, which I like because I'm flexible. So it works for me. And out of those 2, one of them, the hills, it doesn't change the pressure. So when it says it's going up to more resistance, it doesn't.
Right.
And I didn't notice that until I had to use the other machine. And all of a sudden the resistance was so hard. And I was like, oh my goodness. So there's only one machine that works basically.
I did look today because I happened to be in the corner. I could see all of them.
Yes.
And it's interesting because the ones you like actually have cables that come down.
Yes.
The other ones don't have cables. So maybe that cable resistance isn't working on the one. But that really is challenging. If you only have 2 machines you like what are how many times do you get the one you want?
Almost all the time. Because I don't think people notice that they're different. Or maybe people don't like the difference. They don't like their legs moving to such a degree. They just want to step instead of stride. So I get it a lot, but also I'm not at the gym at busy times. So that might be good too.
So does it ruin the workout if you have to use another machine?
No, the other machines are fine. They get my cardio up too, but I like my favorite machine, you know?
Yeah. So for me, it's not so much a down. Like it's not so much like, it's ruined, but it is when you get your favorite machine at the gym.
Yeah. I love it.
It's a great day.
It's like, yeah.
Here's a thought. Popped up while running. Of course, not all thoughts when you're out for a run are positive. Sometimes you think about the things you see that are a bit negative. And over the past few years, I get bummed out at times. I lament that the polarization that I see in the world around us. Fortunately, it's not so bad in my circle, the people I know, but I can't help but see it and be saddened by it. Because it really doesn't help. And I'm not going to get political. We're going to avoid that for sure in this show. But that concept of polarization, I think it's something we need to get past. And it's odd. I remember when I was in university, I studied history and philosophy. And on the history side, I remember quite a few times reading about something that happened in history and thinking, that's nuts. Good thing that never happen again. Doesn't make any sense. And here I am watching a whole bunch of history repeat itself. But I think that's another topic that I might think about when running. So sometimes polarization, the way I see it, the analogy I think of is sports. And it starts off as innocent. So in our family, for example, somebody I know lives in Ohio. And so they're Ohio State fans. And someone else we know went to Michigan. And so they're Michigan fans. And those guys have, let's just say, a fun rivalry. And on that level, it's great. You get poke fun at each other and you want your team to win. But then you start to watch others who are involved in that same rivalry, and it gets a little intense, and you wonder what's going on. And essentially, if you're a fan of one team, and I just pick those randomly, but you can pick any teams. If you're a fan of one team and you let it go too far, anything the other team does is wrong. Anything your team does is right. And you see that in different contexts, where if you're in one camp, anything the other side does is wrong, and you rally against it. And so, out for a run, trucking along, and I remember back to hockey days. And so our kids played hockey and travel hockey, and we'd often be in stands watching games. And I'm not saying they were our games, but, there's quite a bit of intensity there can be at times between parents on opposite teams. And I couldn't help but think that if you take those same people, so you take those 60 people in the hockey rink, 30 of them on one, 30 on the other, and they're intense and they're glaring at each other, and they think the other side can't do anything right. We can't do anything wrong. If you take those same people who can't really see anything in common with each other, and you put them into a larger group, maybe some huge rally or maybe the Sky Dome for a Blue Jays game. And then you start looking around, have those people start looking around for people who have similar outlooks to them. Well, they'd be looking at each other because they understand the sacrifice you make for hockey. They understand the hard work. They understand, and appreciate what they see when kids are out there giving it everything. There's a whole bunch of things that they all understand because they're all going through the same grind during the season. And it would just be nice if people could start seeing what they share in common with the people they think that they're polarized against. And that's what occurred to me when I was out for my run. It's me. Am I?
Yeah. So let me say, flip side of the coin.
Well, in my spare time, I've been getting ready for the wedding, for our son's wedding, thinking about it and buying stuff and doing stuff. And John asked me what he should do. And I said, well, you should write the speech because you're really good at that. I'm good at talking, but if I don't prepare what I'm saying, sometimes you never know what comes out of my mouth.
That's true.
What I'm going to say, because I talk a lot and I have no problem talking in front of people.
You know what that just reminded me of for some reason?
Who knows what
it's
I'm gonna
not
say.
Actually what you said, but after you did your very last show, after you sold your dance studio all those years ago.
Yes.
You did your very last show.
Yes.
And then you said something, bop, and you just dropped the mic.
Yes.
And it looked really cool. And then you told me afterwards that the people in the sound booth were like, what are you doing? Oh my God.
Yeah. Because Kalita, who is my coworker who ended up buying the studio from me, said to me, you should drop the mic at the end. And so in my head, I was like, okay, I'm going to be cool and drop the mic. And then they all had a flip. And that was the first show. So they said, please do not do that again.
Right.
And yeah, so I didn't.
Well, it did look awesome.
But it was funny. So I said to John, hey, why don't you write the speech? And he said,
so I said, okay, well, I assume you do the basic stuff, like thanks for the people who came from really far away, all that.
Yeah.
But then am I supposed to make it funny? Like, should it be about Jeremy, like stories about Jeremy, or should it be kind of, maybe a funny relationship point, advice type thing? Like, what do we do?
I think it has to be interesting and short. That's what I think.
Okay. Interesting and short. It can kind of go in different directions.
Yeah.
And then I remembered back to our wedding.
Yeah. And so then we had an argument.
Yeah, because I said, I'll give a piece of advice, but initially I'll give a fake piece of advice.
Because generally when you're out doing a wedding, like when you have people that are going to speak, but you don't know what they're going to say.
No, you have no idea.
You have no idea, but you know who's going to speak.
Sheila had an uncle who will be remain unnamed. He did a little speech. He had probably a couple too many drinks. And
oh my God.
At one point he says, here's some advice. Just remember, Sheila. And so everyone's like listening as if it's going to be really good advice. And he said, if you're wearing the pants in the family, someone else is going to be wearing the fur coat. And everyone was like, oh my God.
Like literally everyone, there was like a stunned silence, which is probably what you guys are doing right now.
What?
And then you're just like, oh, that is so bad. It was so bad.
Yeah.
So bad.
But like, to me, it was like so bad that it was funny.
No, not to
some
me.
things
It
are
was
that-
not
Not
at
to
all.
people in your family.
Well, especially not appropriate for a newlywed couple that are just starting their marriage. Like, you don't need to tell them that, in 30 years, if you're wearing the pants in the family, someone else is wearing the fur coat. Like, that's totally inappropriate.
Plus, you were still a little ticked off because on our stag and dough cake, there was a picture of a cave woman dragging a caveman by the hair.
Yeah.
As if Sheila's like the boss. So
It's just ridiculous.
it's just sad that nobody knows that I'm the one who's completely manipulating everything in this relationship and just making it look like you have all the control.
Whatever. However it works, it works.
Yeah.
So
then I said to Sheila, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll say, I'm not going to give too much advice. It's not my business, but one tip I'll give you is, and I was going to say that.
no.
As a joke. And then everyone would laugh and I'd be like, it was a joke. And
no.
Sheila's like, you cannot say that.
Do not say that. And what do you guys think? Do you agree with me? Like, do not say
Yeah,
that.
well-
Do not mention it. May that die in a grave somewhere and never come up again.
Okay, so I'm not going to say it. I do have a piece of advice that I do think we learned in our marriage that applies to everyone. So I'll probably do that one.
Excellent. And then
okay.
say maybe something funny about Jeremy.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely talk
That's-
about Jeremy. Like
I
it'll
love
be
it.
mostly about him and Amy.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be about us at all.
And a little more advice I can give you is don't talk about, growing up in every episode that he had in his life and make it 1,000,000 hours long.
No, it'll be something short.
Short and sweet and complete.
A lot of times in my job, I have to really focus and get something done in a short time. And I've learned how hard it is to do that.
Yeah.
That you think you can fit in so many bullet points in 5 minutes. You can't. You've got like 3 bullet points. So, okay, that sounds good.
Good luck, John.
Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own, and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct, or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way.
And it's sign-off time. You have Sheila with John and Elise. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
This week, I actually hurt my back at work. So I was down and out for at least a day, but it slowly got better. So I didn't do a lot of exercise this week. Hopefully I'll get back into it because my back is feeling a little better. We have had a lovely long weekend. We came up to Owen Sound to visit Elise and Steven. So that was nice. And I've been getting ready for the Stag and Dough, which is this Friday. So lots to do for that. So that's what's up with me. What about you, Elise?
I'm actually heading to the dance studio this week, which is pretty exciting.
Wow.
So I used to teach dance, but I haven't since COVID. And I was helping out a dance company with a dance for competition, and they're competing next weekend. So I'm going to go into the dance studio on Tuesday and help them rehearse their piece. And I'm pretty excited to be back in the studio.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Yeah. How about you, John? What are you up to?
Well, I'm enjoying this weekend, and I'll tell you why. Because in my job, I usually have a lot to do every day. Every day I go in and I make a to-do list, and I usually put at least 6 things at the start that I really want to get done that day. And I often don't even get to any of them. For the last month, there's been 2 or 3 things on the list never quite get to. Have to get to it at some point. Well, Thursday and Friday broke perfectly. It just so happened that things settled down enough that I got through my entire list by about 4 o'clock on Friday. I was totally done, thinking, hey, we got a long weekend coming up. So the first time in a very, very long time, I headed into a long weekend, relaxed and able to chill out. And that's what I've been doing.
Nice.
Yeah, got lucky.
Well, very good. I hope you all have enjoyed your long weekend and enjoyed the podcast. We will see you next week. That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.